Hello, and welcome back to 50 States, 50 Murders, the podcast taking you, the listener, on an auditory road trip across all 50 states while discussing 50 different murders. Thank you all for tuning in to episode 10. Dakota, where are we traveling to today?
We're heading to Cottage Grove, Minnesota to look at the death of Amy Allwine.
Again, welcome back to 50 States, 50 Murders. If you did not get a chance to turn into our last episode, we visited the Show Me State in Missouri. Dakota, you and I are going to be packing up and heading out to the state of Minnesota. In Columbia, Missouri to Cottage Grove, Minnesota makes for a 7-hour, 472-mile drive. Episode 10, we're going to be 1/5 of the way through the United States. How have you felt so far?
Feeling good.
A lot of
good cases.
A lot of good cases, a lot of interesting states. We have a couple top 10 states in your list thus far. I'm excited to see if Minnesota will also rank up there. Do you count driving through a state as going to that state?
No.
No, you have to actually get out and spend a day. Is that what qualifies?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, I've drove through Minnesota, but we didn't actually stay there for an entire 24 hours. So I guess I can't really count that. But
how'd you drive through there?
So on our West Coast trip to Montana, we drove through a tiny little piece of Minnesota.
Yeah, that doesn't count.
Doesn't count? Okay. All right. Fair enough. Yeah, so as we get situated here in the state of Minnesota, we're going to be covering a murder that took place here 7 years ago. I feel like we have a very interesting case. I'm excited to talk about it. But before we get into the case itself, let's explore Minnesota a little bit here. Attractions, things to do, things to see, as well as some notorious murders that happen to take place here. Minnesota is nicknamed the land of 10,000 lakes. Dakota, I feel like this one's pretty self-explanatory, but nonetheless, there's just a shit ton of lakes in Minnesota. The Los Angeles Lakers is kind of relevant. They're in the West Coast Finals. They're actually from Minnesota originally, and the reason they have the name Lakers, because from Minnesota, they got a lot of lakes. Were you aware of that?
No.
Okay, well, Minneapolis Lakers is where they originated. Minnesota is one of the most northern states we have here in the United States. It's bordering Canada, east of the Dakotas, west of Wisconsin, and above Iowa. Murder per capita is 40th, 3.4 murders per 100,000 people. Some famous Minnesotans, I believe that's how you say it. We have Prince, who was arguably the greatest guitarist of all time. I mean, Dakota, who's your most famous guitarist?
Man, I don't really have famous.
All right,
greatest.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and mark Prince in there for that one. Bob Dylan, famous rock and roll singer / songwriter. Someone you're probably a little bit more familiar with. We have Chris Pratt. Mm-hmm. You're a big Chris Pratt guy.
I like him.
Parks and Rec.
Yeah, Andy Dwyer. That's one of my favorite shows ever. Jurassic World. Love him in that. He's all right in Guardians of the Galaxy.
Are you a Guardians of the Galaxy guy?
I do like the movies. I haven't seen the new one.
Haven't seen the new one yet?
The
Okay.
first two were good.
Okay.
I don't really like Marvel, but those were up there for some of my favorites.
Okay. We have a callback to Judy Garland when we were discussing Wizard of Oz in the state of Kansas. Judy Garland is from Minnesota. And lastly for me, John Madden. I mean, NFL player, coach, commentator, and video game guy. R.I.P. to John Madden.
Boom!
I don't know. You got any other Minnesotans that I may have missed? Did I check off all the boxes?
No, that's interesting. I didn't know John Madden was from there.
As far as attractions go, you're traveling to Minnesota. You're doing more than just driving through. You're going to actually stay for a couple of days. What are some things to do in Minnesota? Well, we have the Mall of America. That's in Bloomington, Minnesota. And this is the largest mall in America. Over 400 stores inside. There's numerous live events. I believe they do like concerts, shows. There's a theme park inside as well as an aquarium. Do we have any interest in the Mall of America?
No, not really. I mean, that's so many stores. I mean, the aquarium would be cool.
Yeah, maybe catch a concert, check out the amusement park. I'm curious to know what the theme park is. I mean, I can't imagine that it's too extravagant, but
I think there's like a little roller coaster and
Okay.
couple of rides.
Kind of cheeky then, but okay. All right. We have the Cathedral of St. Paul, obviously in St. Paul, Minnesota. So if you're someone who's a fan of architecture, I think this would be an awesome place to stop and see. In St. Paul, Minnesota stands a massive cathedral built in the early 1900s. There's marble columns, stained glass windows, several different statues. The dome of this church is over 175 feet tall, and it is open to the public. What do you think about the Cathedral of St. Paul? Something you'd like to see?
No, I don't have any... This isn't the cathedral I would choose to go to.
Okay.
No, that's for sure.
All right, well, I got one last thing here. Hopefully I can gain your attention. We have the International Wolf Center. This is in Ely, Minnesota. So located in Minnesota is the International Wolf Center. Minnesota has a healthy wolf population. It's something that the state takes pride in, hence the Minnesota Timberwolves, the NBA team. And here there's several different exhibits where you can observe the wolves, learn all about them, and at different scheduled times you can even see them being fed, which I guess is pretty cool to see.
Yeah, my favorite exhibit at the Cleveland Zoo is their wolf exhibit, which is pretty awesome.
Okay.
I was actually amazed. Columbus has a pretty big one. They have different kinds, and they're separated, obviously. A timber wolf is about 4 times the size of, like, a regular wolf. Like a Mexican wolf is what they have it next to. It's crazy how big those things are.
Okay. All right. So that's maybe something that you might be interested in checking out if you're ever in Minnesota. How about some infamous murderers in the state of Minnesota? What do we got this week?
We're going to start off with the Weepy Voice Killer. Back in 1982, there was a serial killer in the state of Minnesota who would call into a police department every time he killed someone. He would cry and confess, and we have a phone call for that.
Don't talk, just listen. I'm sorry what I did to Compton. I couldn't help it. Don't know why I had to stab her. I am so upset about it. I keep getting drunk every night. I can't believe it. It's just like a big dream. I can't think of being locked up. If I get locked up, I'll kill myself. I'd rather kill myself than get locked up. I'll try not to kill anybody else.
So the anonymous Weepy Voice Killer was actually identified as Paul Michael Stefani. Stefani killed 3 different women. He was sentenced to 58 years in prison, where he died of cancer in 1998.
Okay, we got a very interesting, potentially our most interesting infamous murder thus far, the Weepy Voice Killer.
Yeah, so his voice is actually what got him caught. His last, not a victim, she ended up getting away. It was a 19-year-old sex worker that he picked up. He tried stabbing her, and a guy close by heard, and he got into a fight with him. And when Stefani got home, he realized that he was bleeding pretty bad. So he called 911, and he was screaming and crying he was in his confession. So, yeah, that's actually how they caught him.
Oof. Okay. Interesting. What do we got next?
In 1988, 4 teenagers gained inspiration from the movie called Lost Boys. It was released a year prior. They decided to kill a homeless man and then drink his blood. Now, have you ever seen Lost Boys?
I've seen the movie, but wasn't there a book as well?
Yeah, I think we had to read it.
Okay. I don't remember reading it, but I do recall watching the movie one time.
So I never seen it. I guess it's a movie about vampires.
Yeah.
I don't know. They wanted to be like the kids in the group, so then 18-year-old Tim Erickson and his brother recruited 2 other kids, and they wanted to form a vampire cult.
Okay. All right. Interesting.
And since 1988, he's appealed like 3 or 4 times trying to get out of prison for this, but he's not getting out.
No luck. Okay.
And I got one more. It's the Thanksgiving Day murders. On Thanksgiving Day in 2012, 2 teenagers broke into a man's house, and they would pay for it with their lives. The homeowner, Byron Smith, killed the 2, but then he waited a day to report it to police because he didn't want to bother anyone on Thanksgiving.
Yeah, sure, I get that. I mean, it's a holiday.
Yeah, but it turns out it was more than just a break-in gone wrong. He had previously had someone break in, so he set it up to make it look like no one was home, and he waited in his basement in a chair holding 2 guns.
Oh, okay.
So then he executed the 2 of them and recorded audio of them doing it. He shot them both multiple times after they're already dead. I think one of them he shot up to 9 times. The audio was actually the key piece of evidence in court because after shooting one of them, he said laughed or something. And he said, "Now you're gonna die."
Oh,
and then
okay.
shot him again.
So he was baiting people basically to break into his home.
Yeah, he thought it was one of his neighbors, and he saw his neighbor driving by earlier that morning, and he got the idea of he parked his car down the street and like maybe left his garage or something. He made it look like he wasn't home.
Huh. Okay, so obviously you have a right as a homeowner to protect your home. If someone breaks in, I mean, technically you are allowed to protect yourself. But, I mean, what about this guy? Did he end up getting in trouble for this?
Oh, yeah. He went to prison for life. Yeah.
Okay, so obviously baiting someone into breaking your home, not legal.
And the way he did it, he executed him.
Yeah, probably not a good idea to wait a day or two.
He tried to argue self-defense, but they didn't have any weapons on them, so
Okay, well,
didn't work out for him.
Those are some pretty interesting cases to start off for Minnesota. And speaking of interesting, I feel like personally, this is our 10th episode. We've had some interesting cases, but I feel like this one takes the case thus far as interesting murders. And I'm going to go ahead and let you kick us off here. What do we got this week?
Amy Allwine was a 43-year-old wife and mother in Cottage Grove, Minnesota, wife of Stephen Allwine, and mother to Joe Allwine, who was a 9-year-old boy. Amy was a kind-hearted, loving human who loved God first, her family second, and then closely behind her dogs. She ran her own dog training business out of her home, where she trained like sports dogs, like to perform in shows and all that.
Okay.
The Allwines were members of the United Church of God, which we will get into later. Here at the church, her husband was deacon. They were devout, extremely. So devout that they didn't even celebrate Christmas or Easter because they were classified as pagan holidays. And they often traveled spreading the word of God.
Very faithfully devoted family here. And yeah, not celebrating Easter, Christmas, because they're pagan holidays. That's something that always catches my interest. But
you ever meet someone like that, actually?
I mean, not that I've heard of people like this, but I don't really recall ever like meeting someone like this.
I've met one person.
I feel like that's more of a Jehovah's
college.
Witness thing, not to do like the Christmas and Easter, but I guess it goes beyond that.
Yeah, that those kind of people they're out there. I met one kid in college that his family was like that.
I mean, I've heard.
Tried to explain it once, and it made no sense.
Yeah,
honestly.
it's interesting, but nonetheless, here's something I really appreciated in doing the research for this case. It was noted that even though Amy was extremely strong in her beliefs, she never forced her views or beliefs on anybody else, and I really appreciate that. Simply, Amy didn't like it when others forced their beliefs on her, so she just felt it was important to respect that boundary when meeting other people. She would talk about it, and then if there was basically no interest, she kind of left it at that. I think everyone can recall who's listening at a time or two when a stranger or even a loved one knocked on the door doing a visitation, and you kind of had to like pretend you weren't home or hide, hit the deck. And I can admire Amy for respecting boundaries when it came to that.
Yeah, that's not really the Christian way, but sure.
It's all good. I like it. Amy was someone who was very devout, which we'll discuss a lot more in this case, but also a very respectful person.
Yeah. So they lived in Cottage Grove, Minnesota, as we mentioned. This was a smaller town, 30,000 people, and in the 4 years prior to her murder, there were only 2 murders documented in the city of Cottage Grove. Now we know more about Amy and the Allwines, devoted God-fearing family in small-town USA. They had no enemies, no grudges. It's easy to understand how crazy it was that the FBI showed up at their house to notify them of a threat.
Yeah, very interesting. I mean, could you imagine just chilling out at your house and the FBI just shows up at your door? What a wild day that would be. But let's jump into that more. So in May of 2016, that's exactly what happened. The FBI arrived to the Allwines' home. And that's because they discovered a threat on Amy's life, putting her in what they felt was grave danger. There were details discovered that someone had purchased a hitman to murder Amy, paying $13,000. So here's the deal. The FBI was not necessarily worried about the hitman itself, as they assumed that the hitman was basically a scam. I think most of the times you hear about a hitman, it's undercover police, or it's someone just trying to extract money. I don't really know. I mean, I'm sure there are, but I feel like 90% of the time hitmen are just scams.
Yeah, you really got to want someone dead if you go to try to find a hitman.
Right. So the FBI, they weren't necessarily worried about the hitman itself, but they were concerned that someone was willing to pay $13,000 to have this person murdered. So whether or not the hitman was a scam, they were under the belief that the person who paid this amount would continue with this pursuit of Amy's death if the hitman did or did not pan out. For those listening, you might be wondering, where or how does one even find a hitman in today's world? And that's something we're going to talk about here. Whoever was paying to have a hitman hired for murder, they did so through the dark web.
So the dark web is like the deep end of a swimming pool. There's no one that monitors you. You swim at your own risk. The deep or dark web is essentially a web browser that is not accessible to search engines that we use daily like Google. It's not illegal to search the dark web, and not everything advertised on there is illegal. However, majority of services and activities that you find on there are of the illegal nature.
Yeah, something I've heard about in the past, dark web, but I've never personally seeked it out. I've watched a documentary about it on Netflix, but I've never personally been there. Have you frequented the dark web yourself?
No, I haven't, but I mean, after looking at this, it's kind of...
Yeah, it kind of draws your
intriguing.
attention. But yeah, that's what the dark web is. It's just a web. It's like a web engine where you can kind of just do your own thing. You're not really being monitored or watched securely. And you might wonder, what are some things you can find on the dark web? As we know, for starters, you can seek out a hitman for hire on the dark web. And as you can imagine, if you can hire a hitman, then the options that exist beyond that are pretty limitless. In 2015, there was a study by King's College in London, England. It classified 2,700 dark web websites, finding that 57% of these websites hosted illicit materials. In 2019, a different study found things had progressively grown even worse. The number of dark web websites that could harm an enterprise grew by 20%. On the dark web, you can purchase other people's credit card numbers, you can steal others' identities, you can make purchase of drugs and illegal firearms, you can possess counterfeit money, and even on a lesser scale, you can gain access to other subscription services such as Netflix or Hulu accounts.
Oh, looks like I might be getting on the dark web.
Yeah.
Now we know a little bit more about what the dark web is, what some things you may stumble upon. Let's get back into the Amy case that we're discussing. Now on the dark web, there's a website. It was called the Bessa Mafia. This website was designed as a place where you could go to hire a gang member to either murder or commit a crime for you. And on the 15th of February in 2016, a user by the name of Dog Day God submitted a request to the Bessa Mafia looking for a hitman to hire.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, Dog Day God submits a request on Bessa Mafia. And I have the request here. So subject is Bitcoin anonymously. I am looking to hire you for a hit, but what is the recommended way to convert cash to Bitcoin anonymously? If I pull $5,000 out for a hit, after the hit, I would assume that the police would see that draw and wonder where it went. So even if the Bitcoins are not traceable, that missing money would raise suspicion. Is there a way to make it look like I am buying something and end up with Bitcoins so that the money looks like it is going to something tangible and not cash to pay for a hit? And response: hello, yes, you can exchange money to Bitcoin on Coinbase.com and localbitcoins.com. We will plan a date together for the hit when you travel outside of the city for a day or two. This makes everyone know where you were and could not be the murderer. Or regarding Bitcoin, yes, you can say you purchased a gaming server that costs $5,000 online with games such as Metin or similar game, and we can provide you with access to one of our money laundering gaming servers for a limited period. You can tell everyone that you invested in online games for children, and they could not prove you didn't, and you are safe. Let me know.
So a few days go by, and a plan is put into place between the contact and the user submitting the request.
So Dog Day God receives a response on March 6th of 2016. Okay, we got the order details. The assigned hitman will schedule to do this job in the night between 19th to the 20th of March. He will wait at the airport, tail her with the stolen car, and when he has a chance, he will cause a car accident to kill her. He will have his gun with him if by any chance a car accident goes wrong and she does not die. He will shoot her deadly. He will try his best to make it a car accident and make sure that she dies on impact. Do you know, is there anyone else scheduled to come with her at the airport, like companion or anyone else? The hitman wants to know, is she scheduled to be alone or if he should be careful about a companion? It is not a problem if she has a companion, but it's good to know, to be prepared. If she has a companion, they might both die in the car accident. You need to be sure is not someone with her that you may feel sorry for, like offspring or a relative that you care about. Let us know. And then Dog Day God responded back to that same day. She will actually be driving down from Minneapolis through Cedar Rapids to Malone. She will have a companion with her, but no one that I care about.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
The target's request was Amy Allwine, provided by Bessa Mafia, was the details of Amy, a photograph of her route, and her car.
So continued dialogue had continued throughout this process. So on March 20th, 2016, from Dog Day God to Bessa Mafia, I have not seen anything. Do you know if this is done? Response. Hi, no, not yet. The hitman has followed her, but he did not have a chance to do the hit yet. He needs to be in a position where he can hit the driver door. Lateral collision to make sure she dies. Other types of impact might have her remain alive, which is not good. In worst case scenarios, this can be done by a sniper. Shoot her in the head and that's it. If that would be the case, would anyone suspect you of anything? Because if not, a sniper would be greatly recommended. Let me know. On the same day response, no, I would not be a suspect. I am fine with whatever you think is best. Several different plans, transactions, and Amy was still alive and well. Given that the murder had not taken place, the anonymous user, Dog Day God, had asked for a refund and was now resending his request. In response, Bessa Mafia had informed the user that the website was in threat of being hacked and was in return now asking for even more money to avoid leaking this threat to the authorities.
Now, as most would expect when dealing with the underground dark web hitman for hire, there's a high likelihood that you're going to run into scams. This was more than likely a scam, and the user did not reply anymore. However, Bessa Mafia did in fact get hacked. That was not a lie. A hacker released all the website's information online, many different people requesting services, none of which were fulfilled. The site would take money and take people as long as they would go. Once this website's information was released online, this is how the FBI discovered the threat of Amy Allwine, which then led to authorities asking to speak to her further to inform her that a hit had been put on her. Upon investigating this claim, the user, Dog Day God, informed Bessa that Amy had slept with her husband, leading to their divorce. Dog Day God hated Amy because of this, and thus wanted her dead. They make mention that they have a child who is friends with Amy's son, so they asked them, when murdering Amy, to not harm Amy's son or her husband, Steven.
Real quick, kind of random. I guess I feel like if you hate someone bad enough that you're willing to pay money to a stranger to kill them, I don't know if I'm worried about her son or her husband. I kind of feel like I'm at a point where, like, I'm cool with whatever happens, but nonetheless, that's just my own opinion right there. So go ahead.
Well, as we saw in our last case, the hitman for hire, they killed an unborn baby. So
right, exactly.
Just collateral.
Yeah.
So the police naturally must ask about an alleged affair and the threat made against her. Absolutely stunned, she denied any of these accusations. She was in a loving marriage, had no interest in an affair. She also mentioned her standing in the church, and an affair would go against all that they believed in.
Right. She can't celebrate Christmas. She can't celebrate Easter.
Definitely can't have an affair.
Yeah, you definitely can't be having an affair. So, yeah, that makes sense.
Amy provided a small list of people who it could be, but explained she couldn't imagine anyone listed would actually do it. Since there was nothing really to go off of, that the open threat was made on the dark web, Amy and Steven left the police station and returned home.
As you can imagine how much FBI showed up to your house and informing you of a hit, someone was willing to pay $13,000 to have you killed. I mean, to me, that's a lot of money. Pretty crazy, but there's nothing they can really do. So, like you said, it was time to return home and just get back to living life. So that's exactly what they did. Just returned back home. And I feel like All you can do is live life as normal as you possibly can be after being someone who had a hit put out on you. To better protect the family, to help continue living a normal life, Stephen Allwine purchased a handgun for protection. And in hopes of feeling more secure, the Allwines installed security cameras throughout their house. Although their life had certainly taken an unexpected turn, which in return brought fear, anxiety, and uncertainty, life's got to go on. And for the most part, that's exactly what they did. Life went on, they moved forward, and everything was starting to feel pretty normal again. There was one day where Amy noticed a strange blue van parked on their street. As Allwine's guards were up and they're on high alert, they did report the van to the police. Police came out same day, they checked the van, and it determined that this was harmless. It was simply just a worker who was taking a break and taking a nap in his van. Again, Amy knew that she must push forward, and that's going to be until July 31st. Amy received 2 anonymous emails, and these emails caused great panic and caused her to reach out to the police. So I have these emails, I'll read them off real quick. Amy, your family is in danger. Last Sunday, you should have received an email with the solution to this problem, and you still have not done anything about it. Are you so selfish you will put your family's lives at risk? If you have not seen the email, check your junk folder. Amy dutifully checks her spam folder and finds the first email as below. Amy, I still blame you for my life falling apart. I don't know how a fat bitch like you got to my husband, but because of you, he left and my life has become shit. I'm sending you this email because it looks like you already know about me. I've seen you put up a security system, and I have been informed by people on the internet that police are snooping around my earlier emails. I've been assured that the emails are untraceable and they will not find me, but I cannot attack you directly with them watching. Here's what's going to happen since I cannot get to you. I will come after everything else that you love. I know about your son, your husband, and your business, and thanks to the internet, I see you have a mother and father in Woodbury, a brother in St. Paul, and a sister in Yardley, Pennsylvania. I've been busy researching topics on the internet, and I have found that if you inject water into the brake line that it will cause them to fail. What would happen if the brakes on the truck fail while your husband was hauling a heavy load? I found how to blow up a gas meter and make it look like an accident. I know that the meter on your house and your business are on the east side, and the meter on your parents' house is on the south side. I'm still watching you and your family. While I do not see your son this week, I saw last Friday he was wearing a black or a bright pink shirt. I see that you moved the RV. Here is how you can save your family. Commit suicide. If you do not, then you will slowly see things taken away from you, and each time you will know that you could have stopped it, which will eat you apart from the inside. By the time I am done with you, you will want to end it anyway, so why not do it now and save them? I think it's an easy choice. 1 life to save 6 lives. Your family does not need you, but you can save them. Do not tell anyone about this email or the deal is off and I will come after your family. Unless you're a heartless, selfish bitch, then I expect to see your obituary in the paper in the next couple of weeks.
Obviously, to say Amy is an anxious wreck is an understatement. There's someone who's put a hit out on the dark web. Now she's receiving emails from an anonymous user telling her to kill herself. Security cams, handguns, and police involvement haven't seemed to make her feel any better.
So Amy reassured the police that there was absolutely no chance she would kill herself. Amy, being a very religious woman, and just like how the affair was against the church's teaching, so was suicide. There was not too much police could do at this point. They did ask to check over all of her electronics. Unfortunately, nothing suspicious was found. Without many options at this time, Amy was once again forced to keep on keeping on.
So we want to provide a quick timeline for those keeping score at home. February 2016, a hit was put out on Amy on the dark web. March 2016, as the hit was never completed, the user who initiated the hit. April 2016, the dark web hit was made on Bisa Mafia, was hacked, and the details were leaked to the internet. May 2016, the FBI made contact with the Allwines, informing them of the threat on Amy's life. July of 2016, Amy received the 2 anonymous emails advising her to kill herself in order to save her family. So it was a very rough start to 2016 for the Allwines, to say the least. Unfortunately for Amy, 2016 would be her last. Fast forward to our story, starts on November 13th of 2016. Stephen and Amy both worked from home. Stephen was an IT specialist and used the basement as his office. We mentioned earlier that Amy was a dog trainer and she trained out of her home. Around noon that day, Amy mentioned that she wasn't feeling well and was going to bed. She continued to not feel well throughout the day. So Amy's dad, Charles, came by to install a new dog door, and since Amy wasn't feeling well, he didn't want to bother her. With her in bed, the dogs were all in their kennels. Charles wasn't there long. It was a quick job. But after leaving, he received a call from Amy's husband, Stephen. He asked if he wouldn't mind coming back to pick up their son, Joe. Since Amy was unavailable being sick, he was hoping Charles would watch Joe for a while he got caught up on his work. Charles was more than happy to come back and pick up his grandson. Amy continued to spend the afternoon in bed, and Stephen took advantage of the time along getting up to speed with his work. Leaving home around 5 o'clock, Stephen would head out to then pick up Joe. And after getting Joe, they'd stop for gas, some food, and he'd text Amy asking if she would like anything, but he didn't get a reply. So he headed home, and Joe was the first to enter the home, excited to see his mom. However, he ran back to Stephen asking why Mom was on the ground. Upon walking in, Stephen found his wife Amy on the ground in a pool of her own blood.
Coming home, finding his wife dead, Stephen called 911 around 7 p.m. This was 2 hours after leaving to go get his son Joe. In a very off-putting, bizarre 911 call, he had informed the dispatcher that she appeared to have killed herself, and we're going to play that for you now.
911, what's the address of the emergency?
I think my wife shot herself. There's blood all over.
Shot herself with a gun?
It looks like it.
Does she still have the weapon?
I don't know.
Do you see her right now?
No, I'm with my son. I don't know.
Why did she?
I don't know. I don't know, bud.
Are we gonna remarry?
I don't know, bud.
Now, just 4 months prior, Amy received emails telling her to kill herself. She informed police previously that suicide was against her beliefs. She would never kill herself, as suicide would prevent her from entering heaven in the afterlife. Yet 4 months later, she was dead of just that, suicide.
Everything about this supposed suicide just felt wrong. This is someone who the local police and FBI were aware of. They were staying in contact and making sure all was okay. The suicide request emails, Amy confirming she would never kill herself. Then you have the bizarre call to 911 from her husband. Their son Joe asking if he was going to remarry, and Stephen laughing. I feel like if you walked into your wife dead, the last thing you'd do is laugh. That was just a really weird call.
Why was that little shit asking that question?
Yeah, mom's dead. Are you going to remarry? It's, really, but like I said, all of it was just bizarre. But, naturally the detectives, they were definitely on guard with this one. In fact, originally, the detective who got the call to come was confused at first because detectives don't normally get called out on suicide calls. But when they were informed of who the suicide victim was, they immediately sped right away. Detectives were not surprised to find details not adding up to suicide. First oddity that we have here was that dinner was started. Now, Dakota, I don't know about you, but if I'm gearing up to kill myself, the last thing I'm going to do is start making mac and cheese. What's the reason for making dinner if you weren't going to finish it?
And it wasn't something normal. She was cooking a pumpkin in the oven.
Yeah, very weird. Just all of it was weird. It didn't really make a whole lot of sense. Also, another oddity here. Amy was on her back with blood around her. Not weird at all. However, what was strange was that the gun was by her left elbow. The reason why this is weird, Amy was right-handed. So why was the gun on her left side? Next thing that was bizarre was the blood. There were drops of blood that seemed out of place. There was blood dripping from her mouth and her nose. And upon doing research on this, basically that would lead the detectives to believe that she was once on her side, but she was found on her back. Now, if you're dead, you're just not going to naturally roll over. So it seemed as if someone had moved the body. Now, the hallway outside of the bedroom seemed extremely clean, almost too clean. So again, If you're going to kill yourself anyways, why start dinner and why clean the house thoroughly? It just seemed very odd. So that led to a luminol test, which only convinced detectives of their suspicions. Testing showed blood in the hallway as well as bloody footprints. All of these oddities were reflecting something other than suicide, and this was now a murder of Amy Allwine.
Given all the oddities in the first report of suicide, given the person that Amy was, taking into account all the threats made prior to the call, detectives were sure that this was a murder. What they needed to do was start collecting a list of suspects sooner rather than later. Here's the thing though, police already had a good idea who killed Amy. Their suspect number one was Dog Day God. The problem with this suspect is it's not actually legit. It's an anonymous dark web user with no actual identity. Their first goal was to prove that the anonymous user was behind the murder, and once they could prove that, their second goal was to identify who Dog Day God really was. Obviously, there was a hit made by Dog Day God, but the police wanted more than just the scam that hit the Bisa Mafia to go off. They found something extremely interesting that would go a long way in crossing goal number one off.
We have a suspect, but kind of not really. We have an anonymous user. They wanted to prove that the anonymous user was the murderer, and doing a deep dive on the username, Dog Day God, police found an account made on Dream Network. This is a real marketplace, and basically it's like Facebook Marketplace, except you can buy stuff like drugs and guns. So on this marketplace, this anonymous user was seeking out scopolamine. What is scopolamine, you might be wondering? It's a motion sickness drug. This is something that is supposed to be consumed in extremely small doses. After this discovery with Dog Day God and the scopolamine on Dream Network, police went back to Amy's body to process a toxicology report and to see if there were any traces of scopolamine in her system. Now, this was a little bit strange because this is not something that's usually requested, but nonetheless, they proceeded with the test. As it turned out, Amy had 40 times the normal amount of this in her system.
Going back to the day that Amy is murdered, she was in bed sick all day. This would explain why she was sick. Detectives felt like the connection to the scopolamine is how it is actually said.
Oh, okay. I'm a dumbass. Okay.
Along with the hit made on Amy was enough to connect Dog Day God to the murder of Amy Allwine. Now they needed to determine who the killer behind the screen was.
Usually, Stephen Allwine, being our murder victim's husband, would be suspect number one. But in this case, given the nature of this family, you have a loving husband, a devoted wife, parents to their son Joe. Amy was faithful in the church, and Stephen himself was a devout Christian. Stephen held a high position at their church as a deacon, living in small-town USA, traveling across USA, ministering. This is a family that was just so deep into their faith. You know, they didn't even celebrate fun holidays that we look forward to yearly. As a leader of the religious family, surely there was no way that he would have been the person known as Dog Day God and the murderer for today's case, right? Police surely had a hard time imagining Stephen as the killer right away. And the list Amy originally provided didn't prove to be any help the first time around. So finding the killer was pretty tricky at first. But later on, there was a surprise admission that fell into the detectives' laps. This really seemed to change everything for them. Stephen Allwine arrived at the police station. However, he was not alone. With Stephen was his pastor and his lawyer. He wanted to inform detectives about an affair that he was having. This was not just any affair. The person he was having an affair with, he met on AshleyMadison.com. Do you remember like the commercials and stuff for AshleyMadison.com?
Oh, I do, yeah.
So for anyone who doesn't remember, I didn't even realize this was a legit site. I thought it was kind of like just fake, but it's a website for married people, and they go on there to have affairs, basically, right?
So, yeah, it seems like a dark web website. Actually.
Almost, yeah.
And this website, they got hacked a couple years ago. I think it was like 2019, maybe earlier than that. But everyone on there just got exposed. So a bunch of people, it caused a lot of divorces, I'm sure. So this called everything about his character into question. If someone who stood for so much was able to have an affair, police wondered how much more he was willing to do. Not only did he have an affair, but he sought out this affair on the internet. This is pretty interesting, given that Amy's murder had so much to do with the internet, between putting out a hit and buying drugs that were found in her system. Stephen had a career in the technical field. As we mentioned, he worked IT at home in his basement office. He worked IT for 20 years. This is someone who had a ton of experience with computers, technology, internet. It was seeming like this was our killer after all.
As a Christian, divorce was not allowed. It was something that was extremely frowned upon. And he would have lost his spot in the church, as divorce is a sin. You're making a promise to God to remain in a marriage till death do you part. Divorce was simply not an option. Has Stephen decided that murder was okay? Seems like some weird logic.
On January 23rd, 2018, the trial was underway for Stephen Allwine in the murder of his wife, Amy. The plan for the prosecution team was to prove to the jury that Stephen was the true identity behind the anonymous user Dog Day God and the person who killed Amy Allwine. The prosecution laid out their belief timeline on that day. Stephen initially poisoned his wife with the high dose of scopolamine. After their son Joe left with his grandfather so Stephen could supposedly work, this was when he shot and killed his wife. Checking the login records for the time in which Joe was gone, there were no records that he ever logged on to the company that he was working for. How could he be working but not logged in? The gunshot residue was found on Stephen's hand, and lastly, blood tracked through the hallway matches the socks that Stephen was wearing that day.
A lot of evidence going against Stephen, but there's always got to be motive. What's the motive, that you might ask? Well, it's pretty twisted. The motive was honestly simple. To avoid losing his high-ranking position in the church, rather than going through a divorce, breaking their commitment to God, and to remain married till death do them part, it was just simply best if Amy was just gone.
Yeah, so I wanted to go back to the church they attended. It was the United Church of God. It's a Christian church that is a Pentecostal denomination. And I know we have some religious listeners, some that are not. So a quick little breakdown. Christianity is by far the most practiced religion in the world, 2.3 billion followers. This is because of how well the beliefs fit into so many different cultures. There's an Eastern and Western theology, and through that there are 7 different branches, and from there many different denominations. Now, you and I attended a Baptist church growing up.
Yep.
That's one of the denominations under the Protestant branch, the same as the Allwine Church. Now, I didn't learn much from there, but I also went to a Christian university where I was forced to learn about it.
Okay.
I got grades on it. And the 10 Commandments are big in the Protestant faith.
Yeah.
And Stephen broke 2 of those, and neither of them were about divorce. Thou shalt not commit adultery.
Yep.
He had up to 3 different girlfriends. Thou shalt not kill. So, load of BS right there. I also found that the United Church of God's official stance on divorce, they talk about the pain that comes with it, and that one should learn when it is acceptable and why it should be avoided, but it never says that it's forbidden.
Oh, okay.
And actually, the Catholic Church is the one that believes that divorce is not an option.
So he committed an unbreakable rule for one that technically could have been forgiven, essentially. After 8 hours of deliberation, the jury came back. And for what it's worth, to this day, Stephen still maintains his innocence. He claims that he was set up and that he would never do what he was found guilty of, that someone had framed him, basically. But nonetheless, the jury didn't buy into this claim of him being set up. They all agreed that Stephen Allwine was guilty of murder. Thus, Stephen was given life in prison with no parole. And Stephen Allwine is ultimately known as the dark web killer.
So, something I wanted to mention. About a month ago, I was watching The Punisher, and I texted you saying the scariest type of killers to me are religious killers. The extremists that kill out of their faith, those are the scariest type of people for me, because they actually believe they're doing this because their God wants them to.
Sure.
Now, this wasn't, I mean, he never said that God told him to kill.
Right.
But essentially, killing his wife is what God would want more than divorcing.
Yeah, he kind of was ranking sin, essentially, in his own head. You know, it's almost like he thought murder was less than divorce, which I would totally rank the opposite way, personally, but that seemed to be his thought process in it. or to hire someone to do it, which I still feel like you're still guilty of murder regardless, whether you did it or someone else did it. But yeah, very interesting thought processes and concepts. And yeah, I think religion can definitely play a scary role in people's decisions once they're like so indoctrined. Dakota, with all that being said, with our dark web killer, our visit to Minnesota, things you can do, things you can see, we had some really interesting murders, infamous murders in Minnesota as well. I have to say, I think the weepy voice killer's got to be my most strange murderer thus far. I know in our adventure through 50 states, we're going to come across someone more weird, but this far, calling in and crying about your murders,
so that
got to be my weirdest one so far.
The call is definitely disturbing. He knew he did wrong. That guy is insane because each time he showed remorse, but he kept doing it over and over.
Yeah.
And he never sought out help. I don't know. That was definitely wild.
Yeah. So a lot of interesting things going on in Minnesota. It didn't seem like there was too many things you were interested in seeing, unfortunately. I don't know if there's anything that I missed that you've found that you might like to see, but nonetheless, tell me what you think about Minnesota, the state we discussed today, and where would you rank them on your list?
Yeah, your attractions and all that definitely didn't help me.
I failed this week. Okay.
The wolf thing is kind of cool, but I would not go to a state just to see a wolf exhibit. So I would have to put Minnesota probably 42.
Oh, 42. Okay. All right. 42. All right. So, real quick, 10 states through. We're 1/5 of the way through the USA for season 1. I really wanted to just thank everyone for continuing to listen and tuning in and taking this journey with us. It's something that we really enjoy. We've talked about doing this forever, and we're finally doing it. Apologies for missing an episode last week, but we're doing our best to make these as interesting as possible. Hopefully you may get a laugh or two. Hopefully you learn something new, and hopefully you find these cases to be as interesting as we do. So, long story short, thanks for tuning in this week, and we're going to continue covering a new state as well as a new murder.
If you've not already, please be sure to follow and subscribe, and tune in next week for episode 11.